Ready? No, you can wait. Call you up. Okay, we're going to get started. If everyone could take a seat. Good morning, and welcome to our session, 3 Ways Climate Finance Helps Us Achieve SDG6. We're happy to have you here. You've survived to the last day of CWE, so we hope we have another 90 minutes at least to learn something useful. Thank you to our session conveners, RWSN, Water for Good, and Water Mission, who've organized an exciting discussion today. Welcome to our online participants. This is a hybrid session, so we may be getting some questions from online as well. Please submit your questions in the chat, and Batima from RWSN is online for you to talk with. My name is Mandy Goksu. I work for Water Mission, where I serve as the Senior Director of Global Partnerships, and I have the pleasure of working with many of you in this room as partners, colleagues, implementers, and supporters of our Safe Water programming. Water Mission is a Christian engineering nonprofit based in Charleston, South Carolina, and we've served about 8 million people with safe water and sanitation. Several years ago, Water Mission was asked to do something risky, which was to enter an investment for carbon programming. We borrowed funds to launch a carbon program in several countries in East Africa. At the time, it was a risk to invest, and today it remains a risk because of the uncertainties of the buy side of the market. Many of you in this room have started your own carbon journeys. Some of you have considered it and said no. Some of you are still discerning whether you will take this calculated risk to generate credits from your WASH programs. And so our hope for today's session is that we'll learn together, we'll understand the risks and opportunities, and we'll help one another make better decisions about the way forward. We want to learn from our mistakes of those who go before us and build on their successes as well. And another thing I've learned is that despite the uncertainties of this new market, the investments we make just help us getting better at service delivery either way. So if you're wondering why this session is called 3 Ways that we're going toward SDG6, mostly that was just to make the title shorter so that we'd get approved. But the real secret is that there are actually more than 3 ways, and it depends on who you ask. So for some, it's an incentive to bring safe water closer to home. For some, it's an incentive to build household connections. And for others, it's a potential revenue stream to cover ongoing operating costs. So are carbon credits worth the investment? Well, that's for you to decide today. Today, you'll have a chance to hear from 4 organizations at different stages in their carbon journey. And then we'll have a panel of presenters and experts to talk through and debate the return on investment and answer some of your questions in the interest of moving forward together as a sector. So we're going to start with 4 presentations, then we'll move to a panel discussion, and then we'll open up for Q&A. So please keep your questions until the last section, which will be a larger Q&A. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Aileen Saraiva Okelo. I hope I said that okay. Aileen is the global manager of the Rural Water Supply Network and is responsible for engaging and managing activities of the network's over 14,000 members and 100 plus member organizations. So over to you, Aileen. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Great. Welcome, everyone. So I'd like to welcome the speakers of our panel today. So first, we'll hear from Eleanor Mott. She's the strategic project manager at Huduma Rural Water Services. She leads strategic projects for rural water utilities that serves over 1.5 million people across West Africa mostly. Her work is focused on strengthening and scaling up Huduma's core business model, and she has a background in economics and prior worked 3 years at AgroConsult. Eleanor, you can come and join us. I'll also introduce already the other speakers, and then you'll hear from them one at a time. Then we'll hear from Adrienne Lane. She serves as VP of Partnerships for Water for Good, where she has worked since 2011. She focuses on strategy and business development. She oversaw 7 years of continuous growth and helped to lead a merger with Life Water International in 2024. Today, Water for Good operates in 5 countries and ensures over 1 million people have reliable water services. So Adrian is an active contributor to water sector collaborations, including One for All Alliance, Agenda for Change, and Uptime. So you can see we are working with quite a high-scale service providers. And then we'll hear from Alan Kahinda from Water Mission. Alan is the Africa Carbon Credits Project Manager, and he brings more than 14 years of senior leadership experience in program and project management and monitoring and evaluation in both for-profit and non-profit sector to his current role at Water Mission International as the Africa Carbon Credits Program Manager. And finally, we'll hear from Keith Rice, who is the CEO of the Millennium Water Alliance, a global alliance of leading humanitarian, research, and business organizations driving results and resources for water security and resilience. Prior to joining MWA, Keith's experience includes serving as a CEO of an African-focused business advisory firm and as president of a global humanitarian NGO, and board roles in several East African businesses. So welcome you all, and Eleanor, you can have the stage first.
Aline, where's the remote? Hello everyone. Thank you, Aline, for the introduction. So I'm going to talk about Uduma and the carbon credit journey. So why Uduma said yes to the carbon journey? We're in the very first phase, where we don't have the certification yet, but we just started about 5 months ago. So here we are in the process. So I'll first briefly introduce Uduma, then explain how we made the decision, which was not straightforward, then describe our current partnership, and then briefly discuss our return on investment for the project. So Uduma is a rural water utility operating in 4 countries in West Africa, delivering water services to three types of water facilities: manual hand pumps, solar water stations, and large pipe water systems. So the logic behind the carbon credits, before diving into the details, is that by chlorinating, by treating the water, people don't have to boil it, so we reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and we are able to generate credits. So we consider different aspects. The first one is around the market intelligence and timing. So what we hear and continue hearing, even during this week, is that the carbon credit journey is challenging. But we also hear great experience and that it was rewarding in the past and that it can be rewarding. The standards, market standards, regulation are complex and getting more and more complex. But we also hear that the market trust is decreasing. With the price that is going down, there's high volatility in the markets, so it's challenging and risky. The second aspect that we considered is around our financial and operational readiness. So we conducted a study in 2022 in Burkina Faso that clearly demonstrated potential to generate credits and profits. But that was very early in the process. We also received the opportunity to get CapEx finance for the chlorination systems in Mali to start a pilot project and then potentially scale up, which would then allow us to start the carbon credit journey. But we were also really aware that we had limited experience operational experience in chlorination, especially in remote and insecure areas in Mali. And then the last thing that we consider, last but not least, is that Uduma has contracts with government over 10, 15 years, and in the contracts, the prices are capped, and there's no room for renegotiation, so there's no way we can improve service level through tariffs, by recovering the costs through tariffs. So we have to find other ways of financing service level improvement, and one of them is carbon credits. And we're committed to increasing service level even if we don't have to in the contract. So our current partnership is with GiveWell, that is financing the chlorination infrastructure and the launching of chlorination services in Mali on 10 systems, large pipe water systems and solar water stations. Within this partnership, Aquaya is playing a monitoring and evaluation role, and Mangrove is providing technical services, technical support on chlorination aspects. And on the carbon credit side, we're being guided through the whole process, the different steps, the 5 steps of carbon credits by Carbon for Safe Water. We also discussed a lot about our financial model that is continuously evolving. It's a work in progress. Again, we're at the beginning of the process, so we can continuously have to adapt our assumptions and to see the potential profitability of the project. But basically, here we've put different scenarios, which depend on the price per ton that we can sell, the number of people reached, whether we get additional revenue from uptime or not. And basically what you can see in the middle here is that if we don't have, if we have no grants, there's no way this project is profitable for us for the level at the scale at which we operate. So all the return on investment over 10 years are negative. In our case, we target 44% of grants, which roughly cover our capital costs, so setup cost of carbon credits, capex costs for chlorination, and in our case, we would be willing to sell carbon credits for at least $10 to allow us to get a 5% return on investment over 10 years. These numbers are very specific to our case, to the scale we operate, the countries where we are. We don't want to generalize here, but this is just to show that it's challenging and it's tricky. So we still decided to go for it because this is one of our strategic initiatives, and we think we can still gain from it. Especially, we also think that it's a way for Duma to improve, to strengthen operations, to build resilience, sorry, it keeps on moving, and to ensure service continuity. Thank you.
Thanks, Eleanor. So I'll share some experiences that Water for Good has had in our pursuit of carbon credits, and we'll be watching closely on Duma's journey as well. We have some similarities in context and approach. So just to highlight where Water for Good is in our journey to pursue carbon finance, we have validated and registered a project, and we were midway through the monitoring and reporting process. I'll share some of the challenges that we have had and why we were not able to continue to pursue the project. It's sort of permanently on pause. So to first share a bit about Water for Good and our approach, we were able to successfully register a large-scale project with the gold standard. We worked with a developer, CO2 Balance, and this project was intended to yield over 60,000 annual credits. The infrastructure type was limited to solar-powered pumping systems with distributed tap stands and kiosks. Here's a picture of what the water points look like and how they serve rural communities in the Central African Republic. I think it's worth noting that this was one of the first voluntary carbon projects in the Central African Republic, perhaps the first, and it's certainly the first in the water sector in Central African Republic. These are chlorinated systems, and so we have been providing a really good quality of service. In fact, Water for Good, with support from Global Water Center and Water Mission, was really part of developing and leading on solar pumping in the Central African Republic and piped water in rural communities. So I think we can note the quality of the service that we were aiming to provide, and our interest in carbon came from the potential value of the ongoing financing to support operation and maintenance. The financing for these projects, which have significant capital expenditure, is all from philanthropy. I think we can also note that we were able to emphasize the value that we brought with CapEx investment to really negotiate a fair revenue and cost-sharing agreement with our developer. That was a really important part of the partnership development process. And finally, I think our most significant accomplishment with this project was that we were able to really explain the voluntary carbon market and develop a partnership with the Ministry of Water in the country for them to really buy in and understand the value of this market to improve services in the country and to delegate the carbon rights to Water for Good and to the developer. That was a really important partnership development process in general, and I think we can share from that specific experience. I think that's differentiated. So now to the challenges. In the middle of our project development process, the standards for the gold standard changed. And the requirements to monitor water quality really increased. We had to not just monitor water at the safety of water at the point of distribution, but actually at the household level. And for our teams, this was a learning curve. That's not something that we were doing as a part of our model and our routine operations. We can understand the value of monitoring that, but to be accountable for that and to have a very high threshold of water safety at a household level, that changed in the midst of the project. So we were adapting to the new standard in our development process. Another totally separate barrier that became a real challenge for the project was our inability to identify a qualified and willing auditor. You have to do on-site auditing of the projects. We pursued or considered remote auditing, but we could not find someone willing to travel to remote rural parts of Central African Republic to audit our project. Perhaps the market for auditors has evolved since this time. This was a couple of years ago, but due to those two major challenges, we could not foresee a path forward for our carbon project. I will note that we had very good household water quality results, but they did not meet the threshold. We were maybe 2% below the threshold for that first year in the results that we needed to see for our monitoring in order for our credits to be eligible. And finally, I'll just highlight some of the key lessons. I think these are relevant for other groups, not just for Water for Good. We recognize that in order for these projects to have a return on investment, they need sufficient scale, and mobilizing the CapEx for that scale is a challenge for most service providers and even larger NGO consortiums. I think there's a significant scale that's needed. Second, we recognize that government leaders can really understand the value of this market and the way that it can improve service delivery, and we think there's an opportunity to do country by country, but also more broader education and partnership development. I think it was frustrating to have the standards change in the middle of our project development process, but we recognize that the value of results-based funding is fundamentally in improving the incentives for higher levels of service, and that's a real value. So we want to see service providers progressively improve, and we see that this is a mechanism for that to happen. We'll also note that our experience doing this sort of water safety monitoring actually helped us prepare for a different form of results-based funding. The Uptime Results-Based Fund is also moving to include a water safety management protocol, and we had some training and some experience with that through our initial project here. But I'd say there's still a gap for service providers to realistically pursue this funding. There is a need for more hands-on training. There's a complexity to these projects. They're difficult to explain internally to your board, to your staff, and externally with government partners and others. So I think guidance, education, and also hands-on support in the methodology is still needed and can be really valuable. So with that, thank you for your time.
Thank you for that. So I'm here to share the water mission journey along the carbon pipeline. So as water mission, we have several programs under this. So we have our Tanzania program that has been verified and we've been issued credits. And then we have programs that we are developing in Kenya, Uganda, and Malawi. So I'll be sharing lessons and experience, our experience running these 4 programs that we are currently running. So our journey started in 2021. We started with a pilot in Tanzania, and it took us about 3 years to be able to learn all the lessons we've learned and make the decision to actually be able to scale into Uganda, Kenya, and Malawi. So in terms of the project scale, we are serving over 400K water users on number of people, and then we have close to 40 projects right now that are under our carbon credits program. And we've generated 72,500 credits for now, but at the end of this year, we have an audit coming up, and we're hoping to generate many more credits by the end of the year, and also for all the other country programs as well. And the portfolio, currently, of course, there are market fluctuations and differences in prices, but we are estimating it at about being able to generate about $2 million in terms of income from our portfolio. So why did Water Mission pursue this carbon journey? I think for us, over time, we've been implementing projects and programs in communities, but we realized that it's easier to generate or to get funding when you're starting up and developing the projects. And we used to have a 1-year project cycle, but we've realized that for the communities to actually benefit more, we need to figure out ways of ensuring that communities have safe water for the long haul. So the carbon credits program helps us to be able to generate additional revenue that can help us do the operations and maintenance for the systems and ensure that the communities and the people we serve as we address the global water crisis have water for very long period, much longer periods of time than we were sure of. So that's a big motivation for us. I think beyond just the revenue we can generate and get and be able to serve the communities, we also see this. We've seen this as a good opportunity for us to improve. One of our core values is excellence. So improve in terms of excellent services that we are providing to the communities. We are able to keep track of, for example, all the assets for the 40+ systems and know when they are functioning and when they're not functioning, uptime and downtime, and be able to ensure that communities are continually receiving water and able to use the water for the different various purposes that they use it for. I think, thirdly, climate finance has also given us a rigorous framework to be able to measure the additional benefits for our safe water projects. So we are currently able to track at least how our projects are impacting over close to 8 SDGs right now in the communities. So we did not have this level of data or evidence on our programs, but through the carbon credits program and the fact that we need to show evidence of us meeting these commitments, we've been able to start collecting this data, and I think we are hoping to be able to now collect this on all our systems, even those beyond the carbon credits program. So in terms of challenges, we've faced a number of challenges. It's not been a very rosy road. So we've, of course, like Adrian shared, changes in standards. That always affects how you are operating and you're running, because you now have to readjust and ensure that you're meeting whatever. We are using the gold standard, and so each time there are changes or adjustments in their methodology, we have to adjust along the way and ensure that all our programs, all our projects are meeting the standards. So that becomes a bit expensive because of the training and everything that's involved along the value chain. And then, of course, the uncertainty around the prices is also making it very hard for us to know exactly how much we are going to generate in terms of revenue. But that's something that is common across the board, so there's not much we can do about that. And then, of course, we've had to invest a lot in terms of technical and measurement difficulties, buying asset management software, and also equipping and getting technical expertise to ensure that our measurement, especially around the additional and verified impacts, is strong, such that we are able to run the program successfully. So that's been a journey that we are continually investing in, even with uncertainty of how much we are going to get out of it. And then in terms of returns on investment, so we know that, and I think we've tried to plan this within our financial model, that the returns on investments are going to be, our margins are going to be small due to the high startup costs that come with investing in such projects. But we know that over the long term, because we are hoping to run these the program 10 to 15 years within the communities, we know that over the long term we'll keep all our investments will keep appreciating, and our ROI margins will keep increasing. And then, of course, verified impact and the co-benefits. So we are now seeing a much broader appreciation and understanding of the impact of our programs, and that's been very, very valuable for us. And then there have been improvements in technology as well as in performance tools. We have information on all our assets across the board, and we are able to keep track of these. And again, great opportunities for us to also partake in opportunities like uptime because we have this information. Thank you very much.
Good morning. So we've heard some great examples of some very hard-won lessons from some individual projects, some successes, some challenges, and with the Millennium Water Alliance, there we go. We are a permanent membership alliance. So we've been addressing this for how could this be a more useful, accessible tool for a broader community. So I'm going to take a little bit of a step back and look at that broader picture. So where we are collectively is on the verge of our first issuance and sales coming up. So our journey with this, we believe that climate finance has important potential to finance, build, and sustain safe water systems to advance our missions, especially in the current funding environment. We're feeling that we all need to be a little bit more creative, and we're feeling an urgency to think differently about how we financially get support for the results we all want to see. What we believe at MWA, though, is to advance this potential in a meaningful way requires scale. Small is not beautiful in carbon finance, but there are a lot of challenges to understanding. We've heard how complex it can be, moving target. In the back of all this, you have a market, which you're hoping is there when you need it, or you could do a ton of work for a year or two and find out that your water quality tests fall 1% below the threshold and you get nothing. So there's a lot of uncertainty. So our thinking on this is how can we lower the barrier for entry for more interested organizations who want to get into this. But that's not enough, because you have to work both on how to generate carbon credits, but then how do you go to a skeptical market and find buyers who believe in the co-impact benefits that we're delivering. So there's a lot of moving pieces. I don't mind complexity, but we're trying to address that together as we look at it. A few things that we've been on in our journey as the Millennium Water Alliance, and just 3 years old. I know enough to be dangerous on this stuff. We're still learning a lot. But one thing that helped us kick off our journey on this was the Conrad and Hilton Foundation supported us to develop a manual, kind of a primer on carbon credits from clean water. And that's on our website. It's not perfect, it's not exhaustive, but it will help you if you're interested to kind of understand the basics of the scale that's required, some of the technical things. So it's kind of a warning label for those of you who are rushing towards carbon finance, but some of the basics on that. And that was a really helpful initial investment to help us start thinking this through. One thing I'll also mention, for those of you who are interested, the Millennium Water Alliance hosts a global technical working group on climate finance. We just had our first meeting last month. It's for MWA members and non-members. We want to have the best minds in the world. I know some of you here were on that first call. We had about 35 experts. And it's a time-bound, maybe a year, technical working group to address some specific challenges and barriers in the community, the first of which were revision suggestions to the gold standard that were sent last week, addressing some of the challenges we've heard to make that a more effective tool for the goals we all want to see. So we've heard this over and over. It's probably worth repeating. Carbon finance is difficult. And for a lot of those of us in the room, we're experts at doing the work, not experts at climate finance. Never mind the market side, all the nuances and details of the methodology. So that's one. There is a soft buyer's market, as we've heard. A few years ago, it was, in the range of $20 a credit. If you can get 6 these days, you're doing great. So again, behind all this hard work is a real market with a real price. So that makes it challenging. And, it's a low price because there are some bad projects in the world in climate finance. And it's not just water, right? There have been forest, you can just Google it or AI it, and you'll find all kinds of scandalous projects that's created a skeptical market. So how can we raise trust and confidence in the work we're doing? We've heard it can be an expensive mistake to explore. You can go down that road and find out that it's not going to work. One thing I would say on that, we believe it's important as you're exploring the potential of carbon finance to get to a maybe fast with your projects versus a really expensive consultant-heavy year-long process to get to a definite yes or no. So we've been trying to help people get to a quick maybe, like maybe this will work and it's worth more investment. So it's really difficult, so why be involved? We've heard some great examples already. We believe it's worth it. Again, first and foremost, our sector needs new capital and new thinking. This isn't the only new capital and new thinking that's going on, but I feel there's a real urgency to lean into new approaches, and we believe this could be one of those. We got into this primarily a few years ago to think about how do we solve the long-term operations and maintenance challenge. Many of us build beautiful systems, then what? So that's what took us to carbon finance. Certainly not the easy-to-understand methodology, but could this be an ongoing revenue source? And we believe it can be to do that, but also a financial engine for the CapEx, for the initial investments to build systems. But overall, as we've been hearing, climate finance increases the quality of our work. When you have to guarantee water quality, water safety at the point of consumption, when you have to ensure that this system will run for 15 years in order to generate carbon finance for 15 years, that's a whole nother level of thinking, which is taking us into whole new realms. How do you create a business ecosystem for repair and maintenance? Uduma, you guys do that great. But again, looking at this together as a community, how do we figure this out? So just to wrap up here, a few things we've been working on as a Millennium Water Alliance. One is on the supply side. Again, scale is important. I'll show you a picture right after this. We currently have 5 member projects in 5 countries that have a pipeline of about 3 million credits by 2030. So there has to be sufficient scale at the individual project level to make them viable. But then for the market side, looking at how can we bundle high-quality credits to a skeptical market. But the technical side of just working together, what are the treatment systems you're working in those environments? What are the O&M models you're using in those? So working on the supply side. On the market side, we have one common project developer we've been using for this bundle, Verity. Is Verity here? There he is. Because there are a lot of complex things to understand on the methodology and the finance side. So they're the geniuses who know that stuff. They help us vet and get our projects going, but help us develop a market on the side after to get the credits from it. You get me. The technical solutions, the global technical working group I mentioned. In the newest effort we're a part of with Verity is building a capital debt fund that could finance eligible member projects. So we're hoping that could be at least $20 million to start. We see that could easily absorb $50 million over time. And that's not like, here's money, good luck, kind of the grant approach. It's based on your actual, if we make these investments in the community, it will result in this volume of carbon credits, therefore we're applying for this amount of CapEx. So kind of switching that, I'm a fan of using grants to kickstart this whole process, but there are high potential projects where a debt facility will help us move faster. And again, we feel some urgency to build scale across the ecosystem. So I know we'll get into more in the panel, so I'll leave it with that. But great to see the good turnout for a morning session on day 32. Is that what we're on?
That is right, day 32. Well, it sounds like a lot of high risk, high reward situations. I would love to share the good news that we have a lot of experts coming up, and the bad news that we have a really tiny stage. So I think we'll have a couple extra chairs over here. We'll just ask the people answering questions to rotate up to the microphones, if that's okay. We're not all going to fit on this stage. That'll be crazy. So I'm going to have Eileen come up and introduce the 3 additional people to come up, and then we'll have everyone come up and take a seat. Thanks.
Yes. I would like to welcome Eric Way. He's the president of Carbon for Safe Water, a unit of the Global Water Center focused on providing end-to-end turnkey support to WASH project developers to help them access VCM for carbon-based funding. Previously, he was the NCS lead at Lombard Odier Asset Management, and before that, Eric was the director at Nature Vest, an impact investment arm of the Nature Conservancy. So Eric. And then we'll have Celine Gongora. She's a senior business development manager at Danone Communities, where she leads initiatives to expand access to safe drinking water through social entrepreneurship. After over a decade in sales within Danone's specialized nutrition and water divisions, she transitioned in 2018 to focus on impact-driven work. She's passionate about corporate responsibility, and she now works closely with entrepreneurs and partners to scale sustainable solutions and inspire great impact across the organization. And then to moderate the panel, I'd like to welcome Louis Bustin. He leads the WASH program at Osprey Foundation. He previously founded and led the WASH program at Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. He has a long background in innovative finance, including managing the environmental finance group at the International Finance Corporation. He holds an MBA and Master's in Development Economics. So please, I'd like to welcome Eric, Celine, and Luis.
Thank you for the kind introduction. They asked me to do this not so long ago, and I said I'm not qualified. Then I saw a video of the practice session for the presentations you just saw, and I said, okay, I'm going to do it. It's a really good way to get educated. This is sort of an unusual session because those presentations were terrific. You almost had an advanced seminar on this topic. What we're going to do here, and if you understood everything everybody said there, this next part, it won't take that long, may be a little too basic for you. But it's possible that not everybody in the room or online had a full understanding of that. So what we're going to try to tease out here a bit is how do you know if it makes sense to consider using carbon credits to support your WASH activities? And we're going to structure this around the basic factors that determine if it makes sense, which is the revenue and the cost. Now, when it comes to, by the way, let me just put a little plug in here for MWA's report. The QR code was up there. The chapter in there on the basics of how to understand this is terrific. And so if you're new to this business, take a look at least at that chapter, if not at the rest of it, because it will get you up to speed relatively quickly. So on the revenue side, we have 3-ish factors. One is, what does it take to make an eligible carbon credit? And not unrelated to that is the question of what is a quality carbon credit and what is a not so good carbon credit. The second factor there is price. How much are you going to get if you can generate the carbon credit? And the third is volume. So revenue, eligibility, quality, price, and volume. On the cost side, there are at least 3 categories of costs. One is the certification and compliance costs, which you have heard from the people with experience are not inconsiderable. They run into the hundreds of thousands of dollars, and to the and time. It takes time to do that. Then there are probably incremental operational costs for your organization to be able to meet the standards that's expected of you in order to generate the carbon credits. And then possibly there are governmental fees related to this. So 3 things to consider on the revenue side, 3 things to consider on the cost side. So we're going to start with the eligibility. We have a lot of folks here who know a lot. I'm going to ask Eric first to give the basics of what it takes to create an eligible carbon credit under the methodology that's been established for safe water. So again, we sort of had the advanced seminar before. We're going back to Carbon Finance 101 here, but hopefully this will get those who have not previously been exposed to this up to a point where they have a better understanding.
Thank you, Louis. I think at the basic level, everything that's related to carbon credits in a safe water context really comes down to the issue of energy efficiency. And the simple notion there is if you are able to undertake an intervention that makes water safe with less emissions that are generated in the process, or ideally no emissions generated, you're able to book the difference, the differential as carbon credits. In one very, very basic sense, that's how it operates. The larger and more challenging question in terms of what Louis also mentioned is what is considered a good carbon credit in the safe water drinking context? So I'd like to take a few minutes just to run through that. And that basically comes down to 2 words. One is how the buy side and how the people like Gold Standard evaluate your integrity and the quality of your water-based carbon credits. So I'll break that into sort of the 2 parts. On the integrity side, it really comes down to an issue of carbon accounting risks. What I mean by that is there are a lot of operators, who use sort of a very big variation of different values, input sort of variables that are required in the various sort of carbon standards calculation to arrive at the carbon tonnage. So I'll just give some example. I'm not going to explain them because they're pretty complicated. I'll be happy to do that offline after this. But one good example, I'm sure you've heard this many times, is a ratio called the FNRB ratio. That has a really, really big impact in terms of the amount of carbon tonnage that you're able to calculate as a result of your intervention. The problem with the FNRB is that historically, some players have taken great liberty in using extremely aggressive, i.e. very high levels of that FNRB value to result in your getting some very, very high, unjustifiably high quantities of carbon standards. So that's a no-go, right? That's a boo-boo. And I would say a similar sort of phenomenon is something called suppressed demand. A lot of the buy side, a lot of these standards do not like to see a very high sort of percentage of assumed suppressed demand that you're applying to your calculations. Ideally, and if you use it, you need to be able to justify it. Other examples would be like overstated baseline emissions. Again, that goes towards increasing the amount of carbon result tonnage that you're able to get at the end of your process. And most importantly, additionality, right? Both financial additionality, which means if not for this particular carbon financing, you would not be able to undertake your project. And then there are non-financial additionality, things along the lines of, look, you're bringing a particular technology platform that's simply not available in the location that you are using. So that would be additionality. If you're bringing something that 10 other operators are already using, there is no additionality at the operational level. So that's sort of integrity. That's all what everybody looks at on the buy side in distilling it into sort of a sense as to, hey, how reasonable, how high, how low is the carbon accounting risk? The lower, obviously, the better. Very quickly then onto the quality.
But the lower the risk, likely the less money you would get. So you're trying to balance having a reasonable set of assumptions with getting enough money out of it to make it worthwhile.
Well, there is some offset. You do get sort of a lower quantity, but you might be able to offset that by increased price.
Okay.
The other sort of big aspect of this is sort of the quality or the perceived quality of the carbon credits. And there are two sets of factors there. A lot of these speakers here have already referred to this. One relates to the scope level of the co-benefits that you're able to embed into your intervention. We heard from Alan, for instance, that Water Mission has been able to work up to 8 SDGs that they're able to sort of align with as a part of what they do in terms of their safe water intervention. Again, the simple rule there is the more, the better. And then there are other issues that really are sort of speaks to the operating level. So, for instance, how adequate are your infrastructure, your processes, your people in terms of being able to deliver the operational and maintenance aspect post-commissioning of the plant, post-commissioning of the system. This is so critical because in all parts of the global south, historically, I think the statistics something along the lines of within 3 to 5 years, these new systems that were built from scratch, were brand new, would become dysfunctional. It wouldn't operate anymore due to a lack of O&M servicing. We've heard things like uptime already, so that's a really big part of it as well. I know that in the case of Louis, he's a really big believer in sustained service delivery. So, I mean, that is really, really a critical part of what would come under the quality umbrella, if you will. And then finally, it's sort of like a delivery risk. And obviously, this really is very project developer specific. But again, this is something that is definitely assessed. And I think I would just close this up by saying, as everybody has referred to, I think the sell side today is operating from a deficit position when it comes to trust. And I think in that context, in that environment, you do not want to be too adventurous. If in doubt, err on the side of being cautious. I think that will always put you in good stead. So I'll leave you with that.
Thanks, Eric. I'm going to just take even a step further back for the folks who have not been exposed to this before. The assumption underlying the eligibility is that the people who are now getting safe water were previously boiling water, and they were using some portion of wood, charcoal, other type of biomass to do that. So this idea of the FNRB, the fraction of non-renewable biomass, if I got that correctly, relates to the fact that you need to demonstrate that you have an alternative that is more energy, that is using less biomass, which is not being burned, which is not creating the greenhouse gases. So that's what underlies all of this. The issue of how you do that and the methodology was well explained by Eric and others, but the basics relate to that. So always good to bear that in mind. I'm going to ask Alan now to talk a little bit more about the experience on the carbon side, and I actually have a very specific question for you, which is one of the things that Adrian said was that They sort of got down this road and suddenly realized they needed to be able to monitor the quality at the household level. I'm curious how you guys do that. But so, sort of a two-part question. One is in this quality issue, how has that worked for you? And secondly, how do you monitor something like this at the household level?
Okay, that's a good question. So I think we've had the opportunity. I forgot to mention that Carbon for Safe Water is also a partner with us, and they've been supporting us. So we've had the opportunity to develop a protocol for us to be able to do water quality testing at household level that we were able to submit to Gold Standard, and it was approved, and that's what we've been using.
Is that sampling? I
mean, yeah, so
there's a sampling.
Yes,
it's not like you literally have to test every household. You can come up with a statistically valid sample that would convince the Gold Standard that it's actually being done.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And but that has to happen. It needs.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that has to happen. But so for us to ensure that this is not a one-off exercise, we've trained our teams to do this quarterly, and so we are not just waiting for the accrediting period to be able to do the testing and figure out these results. We do this on a quarterly basis to ensure that. We are not finding out.
You wouldn't want to get to the crediting period and discover suddenly that things weren't the way you expected
exactly.
them to be.
So
okay.
Yeah, so that's how we've been able to deal with that.
Okay. And on the quality side, all of those potential co-benefits that you listed, what has your experience been in talking to buyers about those? Do they care?
So yes, so we haven't yet gotten to the level of talking to buyers, but maybe I can talk about how we've been able to measure those as well. Mm-hmm. So we've, I think, over the last couple of years, been able to ramp up our monitoring and evaluation capacity within the organization, and so we do again sample out households from the communities. I think you're supposed to do about 110 households for your program. We try and oversample, and then we ask them. We've developed questionnaires, surveys that we go out to the communities each monitoring year, and then collect data on all of the different SDGs that we are tracking. And then, of course, for our systems, we do solar-powered systems, so we have remote monitoring sensors on each of the systems, so we're able to collect the daily water production for each of the systems. So that's also data that it's critical and important, and also the amount of kilowatt hours our solar systems are generating and using to pump the water. So we realized that you sort of have to automate some of these processes because, again, these projects only make sense at scale. And if you're going to scale, you sort of have to invest in systems that are going to help you be able to run a program more efficiently at such a large scale.
Great, thank you. We're going to move on to price, but I want to ask Adrian and Eleanor if they have want to comment on the sort of the eligibility, the quality, and the integrity, if there are other things you'd like to say. That was a no. That was a what?
I'm happy to, but I think if you have more pointed questions for other of us.
Okay, well, we'll come back because we're going to get to Q&A, don't worry, and I'm sure there are a lot of those, and that Q&A will be both here and online. So price, I'm going to turn to Keith. Can you talk a little bit more about how carbon credits are priced? What do people look for? Is there a market price for carbon credits? And we hear about a voluntary market and a compliance market. Maybe you can give us sort of 101 on what that's about.
I wish I could, Louis.
Yeah. Okay, then we'll ask somebody from the audience. No.
Well, actually, no, to be fair, our project developer, and this is kind of actually, I'm not going to completely dodge your questions. We have a project developer whose job is to be experts in looking that way. So we don't, I've heard enough from Alex this year, from Britti. But yeah, there is a market price, but like any asset, there's willing buyer, willing seller. So we have contracts with our project developer at an above market price. So I'm sure there's an average price, was it $6 these days? We're getting more than that because there's some buyers who believe we like the quality of what you're doing, the story of what you're doing, and to the point about wrapping these co-benefits, they're like, we want to be a part of that. So our kind of theory is that if we can wrap high-quality projects under the umbrella of MWA members, that will get us a premium within the market variation. That's it. On voluntary versus thank you. Compliance.
It's early.
The one thing I would say about this is there's been quite a lull in the market from a decrease in price. There hasn't been a lot of movement, but recently there have been some Article 6.2 adjustment letters happening, and those are country to country.
Okay, translate that, please.
Alex, you're about to stand up. But for example, within our bundle of projects, Rwanda and Singapore signed an Article 6.2 adjustment, which all of a sudden gives them a $20 a credit market.
So the compliance market, if you can get into it, is at a much higher price point.
And overall will increase demand for credits, which is supply and demand. I'm an economist.
But there would be hoops you have to jump through.
For sure with the Article 6. Alex, would you add anything?
Oh my gosh.
To what I said?
Wait, hold on. We got to get you a mic because otherwise the folks online can't hear you.
We pay them to know this.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot, and it's moving fairly quickly. So Singapore and Rwanda signed a bilateral agreement just a couple months ago for Singapore's compliance market. Companies that are active in Singapore can offset some of their emissions by purchasing from any country that has a bilateral agreement with Singapore, which I think is only 5 or 6 countries. Rwanda happens to be one of them. And then Singapore also, and any country doing Article 6.2, for compliance, has to then say which methodologies they will allow. So there are other countries, for example, that have bilateral agreements with Rwanda, but they do not allow this drinking water methodology. Singapore happens to, which is great. And so all of a sudden, as of a couple months ago, water credits from Rwanda are eligible for a new compliance market in Singapore. But in terms of additional activities, you must, as a project developer, be able to get a letter of authorization from the host country, the country where the credits are generated. And that letter of authorization basically confirms that country will give a corresponding adjustment for the Article 6.2 Paris Agreement section, meaning that they won't count those credits towards their national goal, right? So to avoid double counting.
Okay. So
that's also, if you can get those, not only Singapore or other bilaterals, but things like Corsia, which is the new global airline compliance regulatory market, require both LOAs, CAs, and often insurance by the project developers.
So this is a highly structured market where you need experts like that to help you. I would think it may also be possible if you're in the compliance market that the government of Rwanda or whatever country where it's the credits are being issued might want a piece of the action. So I guess it's possible that they may want to get some of that funding directly to the government. But we can come back to that if there are further questions. Okay, I'd like to turn to, quick.
I think historically, just on the VCM pricing, historically, if you have a very commoditized credit, you would try to go to the exchanges, the marketplace, and deal in volume and very quickly. Most people do not do that. Historically, up until today, most of the volume of the really higher value or perceived higher value VCM credits are all done on a OTC, bilaterally negotiated basis.
Okay, great. So I want to turn to Celine, who has the investors' perspective on this, to talk about these issues related to revenue in terms of the quality and the integrity as well as the price.
Yeah, one factor to also take in consideration regarding the price is the willingness of buyers to purchase this credit, and some factors like FNRB rate, social co-benefits, etc., can really influence the price. So it's pretty hard for an organization to build a business case. And what is, as an investor, what we recommend is to be very conservative, because some figures that were also shown by Eleanor showed that depending on the price, your business case can totally change. And when you invest so much at the beginning, all the upfront costs are so dependent on many factors that it's hard to really manage. And these companies are not experts. So they're also relying on a consultant and advisor. So I understand that I can see that it's pretty complicated to navigate in.
Okay, thank you. Volume, we know that volume is an issue here, because if you're not making a lot on each transaction, you got to have volume. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. Keith, can you talk briefly about the idea of pooling carbon credits, and what are the challenges of doing that? Can you do it across countries? Is it just within one country? Can you get a program approved by the gold standard that allows you to do that?
Yeah, so as we've heard, there needs to be sufficient scale at the individual project level for it to cover its costs and throw off resources for O&M and all that. By scaling across projects, and yes, that can be across countries, that gives us economies of scale to make better arrangements with our project developer. One, you're de-risking, so 3 million credits across 5 countries is de-risking by just nature of a portfolio approach. But it also enables our project developer to in our sense, raise capital, but also attract buyers. We have a lot of transactions.
So you're getting diversification as well as the volume.
As well as the volume. So think about the lack of economies of scale of doing project by project is the same for the market. If they're buying 5,000 credits at a time, you're doing the same amount of work. So if you can take them and say, hey, here's 500,000 credits that have met a certain standard per us, negotiating that. So scale is important both at the individual project level, but also for the ecosystem, the business ecosystem of putting this together. And even like with this arrangement Verity has with Singapore, that price point puts available resources into the whole ecosystem. It kind of de-risks the $8 credits being sold against the 20. Not that we share the revenue, but it helps them do their thing on our behalf.
But presumably you want to have long-term contracts here, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, so you can.
You don't want somebody saying, "Oh, I'm going to pay $20 or $30 for 2 years," and then finding out that after that you're on your own.
Yeah, well, that's any business strategy is going to be you're betting on a future price and what you're going to agree on today. So typically you do but you need predictability, which is the counterpoint. So we're kind of betting at a floor price which is currently above market. Alex, when the market goes to 20, we're going to renegotiate.
Okay, there we go. Deals being done on site. I'm going to turn briefly to the cost side, I think we got some very good information from the presentations on the challenges of cost. Eleanor, is there something you'd like to add? Because, as I said, you've got at least 3 types of costs here, and I think it's worthwhile to know what your cost structure is.
Yes, thank you, Louis. For now, I mean, our experience with the cost is very theoretical because we just started the process. But what I can say is, in terms of governmental fees, I don't think, I mean, for now we don't have to pay fees to the government. If we make profits, we will have to pay taxes, of course, but we're not there yet at all. In terms, what we did is just trying to budget as much as possible and to be very realistic in terms of our costs, in terms of clarinations, what's our OPEX, CAPEX over 10 years, and trying to figure out the level of grants that we need to cover the certification and compliance costs. Because from our model, what we really see, as I said in the presentation, is that the revenues from the carbon credits that we could generate really can't cover the CAPEX cost. So it's likely to evolve if we generate more carbon credits, if we scale up, I don't know, it will evolve. But I think as a service provider of our size, our really task is to closely monitor.
I really appreciated the rigor of the financial analysis that you've gone through there. I'm thinking that I might ask Alan at some point what their financial analysis looks like there, but I'm not. But we'll hold off on that one. Adrian, did you have anything else to say on the cost side?
I can speak to transaction costs.
Sure, come on up.
Yeah. Thanks. So I think when we're talking about things like the FNRB and other aspects that can really affect the volume of the credits as well as their value, it's important to see that as a risk and something that can affect the revenue, but it also adds the transaction cost to have to understand and quantify the impacts along the way. So from a very practical perspective, we're being asked by our developer to help find ArcGIS files with the forest cover in Central African Republic. So why? I have to explain that to our programs team and participate in a process that can take you down different courses and that are often quite technical and, again, hard to explain. So I think that broadly, when you're considering is it worth it to pursue carbon as a source of finance, you have to have a team and an organization that's willing to have a sort of learning culture and to expect that there will be unexpected technical details and challenges that relate more to the transaction cost as a whole and the kind of uncertainty of pursuing that. So you obviously have a financial risk associated with the value of the credit, but I think it does lead to a cumulative sort of transaction cost and organizational burden to participate in such a complex process. Because of that, we developed a cost-sharing agreement with our developer because though our project was not so expensive to develop, as we went along, we wanted to be able to negotiate who would share the cost burden of each individual activity. Not every agreement will have that same dynamic, but that was our way of sort of de-risking the process as a medium-sized organization pursuing this in a high-risk context. So I think those are some lessons that might be more relevant for folks who are on the implementer side and seeking to consider this. And I think one final point is that you will see that Water Mission, UDEMA, and Water for Good have, as organizations, a learning culture, a commitment to being a first mover. And so we're happy to share these learnings and also recognize that there's opportunities to scale to create a portfolio effect that can really make this more applicable broadly, and we're excited to see what MWA is doing on that front.
Thanks, Adrian. I think being a first mover also almost always comes with a bunch of scars and I think you've seen a bit about that. Okay, before we turn to the Q&A, I want to give Celine the opportunity just to give the broader perspective as an investor here, if you would do that.
And talk about the risk. It was, and what is interesting to see, you see here organizations that have started the journey, but we also see organizations who have been issuing carbon credits successfully for 10 years. And we have seen the benefits, the financial benefits, the benefits on the quality, on the transformation of the companies to make them data-oriented. So there are many, many benefits for organizations. But now it's a tough moment because there are all of these changes in terms of regulation, methodology, price, that I think this is the hardest because they have started their journey and not getting the revenue yet. So, how to, what to do? So this is the risk. And one thing is to be, I think, what I would say is now is the time to maybe, in some countries, we can see that, for example, in India, FNRB rates have made the carbon markets dead. It's not possible anymore to start any carbon project, and the companies that were having carbon project cannot issue, won't have enough volume to issue carbon credits anymore in the future. So it's very country specific. And in other countries, it will have impact on these companies. The volume will impact them, and it will also push them to be creative and to find another other source of revenues. And so it's an endless circle when you provide safe drinking water to vulnerable population at a capped or at a very limited price. It's complicated. So, and not having this possibility to subsidize price of the water through carbon credits anymore will also make this company think out of the box again.
Great, thank you. Okay, I'm just going to make one quick comment, then turn it over to Mandy for the Q&A. Osprey does not have much experience in this market, but we do have experience in carbon finance in the clean cooking area, and it is an unusual market. There's not really a regulator. There are these bodies that are making decisions, and that creates what generally might be called regulatory risk. But I think it's useful, it's instructive to have seen what happened here, where because of the quality concerns, the folks that make the decisions on the certification process change the rules of the game. And it's really, I mean, one of the things businesses hate is when the rules of the game change. So that on the other hand, I think the effort to do that was to make sure that there was a very high quality standard, because the previous set rules were causing real problems in the market. The market had, and that's one of the reasons the price is low, is because the market had really lost some confidence. So with that, I want to thank everybody here, but I'd ask you to stay so that you can answer questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Louis. Thanks to the panel. Please stay. I'm sure we have a lot of questions in the room. We're going to start here in the room. You'll need to use the microphone so people online can see. Dean, we'll start.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I was wondering, in our program, sometimes we have like solar-powered water systems, so that it's about avoidance, but also we do reforestation, that is more about removal. Are there different markets, or can we put them together, or how does that work?
Yeah, maybe I will ask for clarification on the side. Maybe Eric, if you want to talk to the not it being not solar power, but rather the avoidance of emissions in the other sense. Yeah, go ahead.
I think the only general comment that I feel qualified to provide is historically there has been a sort of preponderance of credits that are based on avoidance. And a large part of that is cost-driven, because if you are doing conservation as opposed to non-conservation, it's a lot more economically feasible and affordable. There has, however, been a swing, and a fairly big one, I would say, within the last 12 to 18 months, towards the removal market. And we've seen that even at the level of these engineered carbon dioxide removal interventions, which are crazy in terms of the pricing that we're talking about there. But that has been accompanied by a very large shift towards the other, historically available sort of removal interventions as well. I'm not sure whether that answered your question, but.
Just to hop off of that, if you are doing, so like Eric was saying, there's a difference between removal and avoidance. Safe drinking water is avoidance. You're saying if we didn't provide the safe drinking water, people, they would boil. Whereas reforestation is removal. You're saying this carbon was in the air and these trees are taking it out. Gold standard and other standards don't allow you to bundle methodologies. You have to do separate projects. But also, like Eric was saying, there's a higher price. Generally, for reforestation projects, it's a lot easier to get $20 to $40. You just, on the engineering side, there's just a group that sold an agreement for $250 a credit on the engineering side last week with Frontier Airlines. Oh. So it can go all the way from on the, like obviously the avoidance side is right now lower on the like $5 to $10 range, whereas reforestation, even though it provides more upfront costs, can have much better revenues in the long run.
Great, we have a question over here.
Cool, thanks very much. Will Tillett from SHA. So I think, Lewis, I like your example of the people who are the front runners often bear scars. So we've been doing it since 2013 on carbon for safe water, and yeah, it's a difficult market. I really like this session because I think there's a lot of similar reflections and a lot of similar journeys. I would really echo that, like uptime, carbon is another form of results-based financing that helps to set the bar and incentivize increased levels of service, and I'd really emphasize that. And I think what we have in today's session is a number of very progressive, kind of enlightened organizations that are really committed to sustainable service delivery and integrating carbon credits within the life cycle costs of that progressively increased service. Not everyone's like that. Not everyone in the market is like that. There's a lot of people who are essentially using carbon for cash cows as an organization to plug institutional sort of organizational funding gaps. And I think we're going to see that possibly even more with the current aid context, if a lot of NGOs are going into it with a bun fight between finance teams and operational teams. So I think that's an interesting one to look at. But I think there's also examples where organizations are implementing carbon projects that are completely unsustainable. They're just doing it to implement, and then as soon as the carbon credits turn off, it's the whole sort of maintenance and sustainability system breaks down. So I wonder, so Keith, I really liked this kind of like cross-organizational, cross-carbon developer, almost community of practice around carbon credits, particularly for water. And I think beyond things like aggregation and influencing gold standard, which is awesome, I wonder whether there's opportunities to also be trying to demonstrate how to do carbon in water in a kind of sustainable and ethical way, and also to see at the country level how to support governments to understand what a kind of a decent, sustainable carbon use of water is, and not just an opportunity for also governments and organizations for cash cows. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, all great comments. I'll just mention one of our biggest risks that we see is exactly to your point, that bad credits will push out the good ones. I mean, that's really one of the biggest risks we see, maybe even as equal or beyond the market risk, which we see hopefully improving. But yes, to all you're saying, I think one of the reasons we're kind of using this story of MWA member projects, not all perfect member organizations, of course, but whatever levels of transparency and quality, so by being a member, you've applied, you've been vetted, you've been accepted into this group. It's a small thing, but anything we can do to increase trust, and then within that portfolio, ensure that our member projects are meeting quality thresholds. So hopefully that has a positive effect in terms of prices we're getting, showing a good example. Ultimately, I'm trained as an economist and I trust incentives, and even bad actors will be attracted to, if we're getting better prices because we're doing better work, hopefully that'll pull some people with us. But it's the biggest risk we see. At the national level, there's a lot there, but yes, I think we need to be not trying to keep our heads down, but engaging proactively. Tax regimes are a big thing, on and on, yeah.
I'm just going to step in as somebody who's been in the sector and knows something about the carbon finance markets. I think one thing, Will, that would help there is if there's sort of radical transparency in how the carbon credits are used. So if in the cook stoves world, there's been a lot of real problems, but when we've been involved in those transactions, we've known exactly where the money has gone. It's related to the people who use the cook stoves. It reduces the price of the cook stoves, and we know that the households and the communities that are creating the credits are benefiting from them. I would say it would be really helpful in this market in terms of trust and credibility to have just as you would with something like uptime with results-based finance, be very clear about where the money is going and what it's being used for.
Go ahead. Yep.
Hi, I'm Jenny with RTI International. So in addition to traditional WASH work, we also do drinking water quality related work on chemicals like lead and PFAS. And we have a global lead-free water initiative to address lead in existing systems and also implementing lead-free materials in new systems. So in this case, I'm wondering, like, if you could, consider this scenario, would you potentially in existing systems, if you had lead-certified filters, like the household, the maintenance of those filters, it would then cover that, and then for new materials covering those fixtures or something like that, is that something that you could ostensibly see as a possibility?
I think an operator question.
It's kind of a more unique take on WASH implementation, because it's going beyond implementing water access to more of the water quality portion of that access for long-term water quality.
I can speak just really briefly. Yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, I went to your session on Sunday on this initiative. I think it's really eye-opening and important, so thank you for the work you're doing. And I would say my understanding of what the carbon impact, the way it's being quantified, I don't think that would be the kind of upgrade to a system that is therefore eligible. It's really around the rights that communities have to boil water to reduce microbial risk. And so people with more understanding of that could expound further from the audience or from the stage. But I do think that by pursuing carbon finance for safe water projects, you can raise revenue that allows you to make broader service improvements, which could include the rehabilitation or modification of your supply chain, basically covering higher costs of service in general. So it does create a stream of revenue, at least in theory, that could allow for those kinds of upgrades. But I don't know if that would be the basis for the project, just to put it in as simple terms as I can.
Thank you.
Yeah, shall I go? Yeah, hi, I'm Gouffran Mansour from Ecopsis. This is a super interesting session. I'm learning a lot, thank you. I was also really surprised to hear that on top of all the complexities of setting up a baseline and training the staff and adjusting, you also have to face changes in the regulations around carbon credits and pricing. Are there any insurance products that you can purchase that can protect you as an implementer? I mean, do these things exist, considering all the effort you would have put into, adjusting your organization, doing the right thing for the verification? Is there anything that can protect you against these, regulation risks?
I think the answer is yes and no. There are a number of emerging next-generation carbon-based insurance companies that are providing some very interesting carbon-based insurance coverage. I'll give you some examples. There are now carbon insurance that's available to cover delivery risk. I mean, when you think about how extraordinary that really is, it covers a lot of potential, situations where where it leads you not to be able to deliver the carbon quantities that you had contracted for. There's also, this is more, I think, traditional coverage, but perhaps with a updated twist. There are the updated insurance policy against regulatory risk. You can now buy insurance against, let's say, a host country's failure to deliver on their commitment on the corresponding adjustment commitment as a part of the LOA process that enables you to transact at the compulsory market. So there are a whole host of new additional carbon-based insurance coverage that are available today. And I would add, most of it is at a sort of on a nominal basis, a reasonable cost. But in terms of some of the questions that you were asking, that actually goes to covering operational risk. The answer is we haven't seen any so far.
Yeah, but I can mention. Yeah, I can mention. Maybe I can mention also the intervention of many funders, like Aqua for All, like Stone Family Foundation. A lot of funders have helped this organization to start their certification process, and by that, supporting the risk. And also, as an organization, there are two ways to go through this journey: is either by starting it by yourself, or you have also some developers in the market who would manage and bear the cost, but also expect a financial return on that. So you have also two ways, and who bears the risk also have the risk or more return to expect if it happens.
An insurance answer, but a risk mitigation angle. So our arrangement with Verity, and this is where this kind of pooled scaled approach is helpful, they buy all the credits at issuance at a price we've agreed on, and then they can hold those. So they buy the credits from across these 5 projects. We get a fair price up front, and to the point, we haven't paid them at this point. They've done the audits, they've done helped us on the front load work, and they're betting the market's going to go up. So when they make that second sale within a few years, we get 30% of the second upside. So if you sold for 10, later they sell for 15, we'll get 30%. So they're taking a risk with us. We get cash flow to support the projects. They're betting on an upside later that compensates them for their efforts. So that helps us a lot. On the operational side, we don't have margin. They don't have a lot either, but it helps us meet our commitments to the community in real time, rather than wondering, will we sell them this year, next year, $6, $10? We can actually use a predictive model against our operations and maintenance requirements. So and they're different arrangements. I think it sounded like you guys had a good, fair risk-sharing arrangement with the project developer, which is important, versus the nonprofit taking all the risks up front, hoping something will work out.
I think we have time for one more question. I think you have a microphone there. And then one announcement from Sean, and then I think we'll be at time.
Yeah, Angelica from SCAT Foundation, so very fascinating talk. And actually my question was partly answered because it was actually in this environment of risk of volatility. I was interested in first-hand experiences on hedging, and I think we've already heard many ways of hedging the risk, and maybe just a very practical experience from the field. I mean, there's all the insurances, obviously very important in these complex situations, but once the project is going on, based on experience, we all know there are always unforeseen circumstances. So do you have like an additional way of, you would say, we could share how to hedge those risks on the field?
You've been sitting way down there, but your comment about the ongoing monitoring, I think, is one of the key risks to be ahead of. So you don't get to the end of the period and realize, whoops.
Use the mic.
Yeah, so anyway, I was going to suggest that was the right one.
So yeah, so for almost all the activities, we are proactively doing them. So of course, the most obvious way of aging is the training. So ensuring that all our staff and within the country programs are trained on the carbon credits program, and they understand the different requirements. And then so it's not just we don't have overheads of different people. We try to work within the already existing staff to have this as an additional requirement or expectation. And then we do practice activities for almost all the activities, such that by the time we're getting to the crediting period and the audits and all of that, we have already practiced a number of times. So almost all the activities are planned on a quarterly basis to ensure that people have enough practice, and we are catching things and continuously taking corrective action to such that when we get to the end line, we are almost certain we are going to pass all the auditing. Thank you.
Great. This is, hello everyone, so Sean Fury from RWSN. To wrap this up, it's been a fascinating discussion. One of our most attended webinars this year was around carbon financing. So clearly there's a lot of interest and energy in this space. So what we'd like to offer as a network is to, if you're interested, we can create a community of practice around this to continue these kinds of questions, this kind of discussion. And also team up with Susanna, because the focus of this session has very much been on drinking water, but the title is actually WASH. And the whole sanitation side of carbon is another thing that came up in the Susanna annual meeting on Saturday. So if you'd like to continue this conversation after this session, over the coming year, then please, get in touch with me, Aline, or any of the Secretariat. So thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Great idea. Well, thank you all so much for participating today. Hope you make some connections with presenters and continue the conversation. Thanks.